Hello, welcome to Book Journey. Today, I'm going to introduce you to the book Mach was du kannst, waarom we onzeer begebunden voelen salten en niet nur onzeer interessen. In the last session, we explored the book What Your Brain Wants to Hear You Say and learned how to enhance the information capabilities of the elastic self to make our communication in work and life more effective and better meet the demands of our core self. However, some of you might ask, Teacher, I know the core self is important, but I feel like my core self is vague and unclear. How can I find my core self? Through today's sharing, I hope to help you better address this issue. Each of us has contemplated what we want to do in the future, whether it's choosing between liberal arts and science in high school, selecting a major in college, searching for a job after graduation, considering a career change, or trying out a side business. A question often arises in our minds: should we do what we are good at or what we like? This question can be both complex and simple. It's complex because at critical junctures in life, we may toss and turn, suffering greatly, losing our appetite and sleep. Yet, it's simple because deep down, we always have some intuition that guides us from the start. We base our decisions on emotional thinking, rational judgment, and the opinions of relatives and friends, but the final outcome is not always satisfactory. It might be too difficult, too boring, not lucrative enough, or even soul-crushing. At this point, we can't help but ask, is there always going to be regret, no matter what we choose? Is the unattainable always the best? In fact, the issue is not that simple. There are more professional perspectives and solutions behind it. The book Mach was du kannst, waarom we onzeer begebunden voelen salten en niet nur onzeer interessen that I'm going to explain today targets this question that troubles most people for decades. The author, Aljashka Neubauer, has spent most of his life researching this issue. He is a professor of psychology at the University of Graz in Austria, and has been awarded the 2022 International Society for Intelligence Research Lifetime Achievement Award and the William Stern Award. He also serves as the president of the Austrian Psychological Society and several other scientific societies. There are not many books on the market that discuss career choice, and even fewer have a scientific basis, so it's well worth our time to explore this book. Regarding the two dimensions of being good at and liking in the book's title, the book mainly revolves around 5 topics. Can I do this job well? Is this job suitable for me? Can I keep doing this job? Can I be more accurate in my self-assessment? What should I do in the future? Let's delve into the content under each topic. Can I do this job well? First, let's consider whether I can do this job well. The key to answering this question lies in understanding your talents or abilities. At the beginning of the book, the author shares a real-life case. There was a young man named Hans, who was fascinated by cars and aspired to become an automotive mechanic at the age of 15. Everyone around him supported his dream and introduced him to various related jobs. Unfortunately, things did not go as planned, and his career path was extremely bumpy. His supervisors were very dissatisfied with him. Although he was very hard-working, diligent, and responsible, he was either too slow or made mistakes that led to complaints and the need for rework. At this point in the story, we might have two different thoughts. One is that he shouldn't be so persistent and should try something else. The other is that he shouldn't give up easily, as hard work and perseverance will eventually fulfill his dream. These two conflicting thoughts have been battling in Hans's mind for 15 years, causing him great distress. The reason we have these two thoughts is that we acknowledge two basic facts. First, life is short, so if this path is not working, we should quickly try something else. Second, there is room for improvement in people, so we shouldn't give up easily. The contradiction between these two leads to the first topic of the book: how can we reasonably predict whether we will achieve ideal results or returns on a particular path? The book suggests that we need to first recognize our talents or abilities. Let's return to Hans's example. After struggling for 15 years, Hans finally sought the help of a psychologist. Upon assessment, it was found that Hans's language and computational abilities were far above average, while his spatial abilities, especially his mental rotation skills related to spatial imagination, were below those of an average person. His dream was to become an automotive mechanic, but a fundamental task for a mechanic is to mentally rotate the images of car parts in their mind, quickly determine how to assemble them correctly, and then perform the operation. It is difficult to say whether Hans lacked talent, but it is certain that he did not develop this ability from a young age. He did not play with building blocks, and he was driven to school by his parents, which led to his inability to become the excellent mechanic he aspired to be as an adult. Hans's example primarily involves spatial ability. In the book, the author first provides nearly 40 self-assessment questions and then, based on his DIPS classification method, lists 10 talents or abilities related to specific occupational groups to help each reader understand as needed. For example, for educators, the author believes that if one wants to become a teacher, they should possess linguistic talent, introspective talent, and interpersonal talent. This means having good expressive abilities, being able to control one's impulses, understanding one's own and others' emotions, and being skilled at mediating between people. When it comes to teaching a specific subject, further considerations are needed. For instance, math and physics teachers require logical arithmetic talent, while dance and physical education teachers need bodily kinesthetic talent. If you feel that you lack social experience and do not understand the talents or abilities required for your ideal career, we can use job recruitment software to solve this problem. Recruitment software often lists job descriptions, JDs, and we can select several representative and valuable ones, extract their commonalities, and compare them with the lists in the book to scientifically understand our talents or abilities. I have also attached this list to the manuscript for you to use for self-assessment when needed. Work is inseparable from learning, but enhancing professional skills through learning does not guarantee smooth progress in work. Similarly, while talent or ability is very important, it is not the only factor. Next, we need to see how to determine whether a job is suitable. Is this job suitable for me? Hans's story is far from over. In addition to assessing talents or abilities, the psychologist also analyzed Hans's personality. Personality determines whether a job is suitable for you. Hans is a very extroverted person who enjoys interacting with others and is particularly enthusiastic about giving advice. Moreover, he prefers to work with people. To be honest, if Hans's talents or abilities were up to par, few people would be unwilling to work with him. In our daily lives, we all like positive, cheerful, and helpful people, don't we? Unfortunately, an automotive mechanic is a behind-the-scenes job, and Hans spends most of his time repairing cars alone, dealing with various mechanical parts. He loves cars, but the job content is quite mismatched with his personality. Perhaps he comforted himself by thinking he would get used to it over time, or he balanced this mismatch with his passion for cars, but the outcome was far from ideal. Whether one is introverted or extroverted is a consideration for most people, especially introverts, who often do not deliberately choose jobs that require interacting with many people. At the same time, introversion and extroversion are just one aspect of personality, and there are other facets to human personality. Through the test questions provided by the author, we can see that having good time management skills and stress resistance are also specific manifestations of personality. After summarizing and refining these specific manifestations, scientists have developed the Big Five personality model, which includes 5 dimensions of personality: extroversion, conscientiousness, agreeableness, emotional stability, and openness. This is a classic model that many companies use to assess the personality traits of job applicants. Most of these 5 dimensions are self-explanatory, but I will focus on explaining agreeableness, which you might find confusing. Agreeableness can be simply understood as how easygoing a person is, for example, having a good temper, being willing to cooperate with others, and not being overly argumentative. According to the table compiled by the author, people with high agreeableness are more popular among those around them, but they may not be well suited for certain industries and positions. For instance, survey results show that compared to strict teachers, very easygoing teachers actually receive lower evaluations from students. It might be argued that within reasonable limits, teachers who are not so easygoing can exert stronger pressure, enabling students to complete their learning tasks better and achieve good grades. On the contrary, if a teacher prioritizes pleasing students, they may lose authority in front of students, making it difficult to manage the class effectively. A similar situation exists in sales jobs. It might be argued that the more competitive a job is, the less suitable it is for easygoing people, because being overly friendly and compliant often means sacrificing one's own interests. For example, a lawyer who is too easygoing may appear passive during debates. We are not saying that an easygoing personality and quality are not beautiful. It's just that the final work results may not be satisfactory. However, for jobs that require self-responsibility and a pursuit of detail accuracy, people with high agreeableness can handle them well. Can I keep doing this job? What we just discussed is that personality largely determines whether a job is suitable for you. Now let's look at the next question. Can I keep doing this job? This essentially asks how long you can persist in a job. The key influencing factor here is interest. Interest, one could say, was a crucial consideration for Hans in his career choice. Judging from the fact that he persisted for 15 years, we have to acknowledge that the power of interest is truly significant. At the same time, with this in mind, Hans's story should come to an end. In the previous text, we explored Hans's love-hate relationship with the profession of an automotive mechanic. He lacked the talent or ability to be a mechanic, and his personality was not suited to working alone with cars, yet he truly loved automobiles. So, the question arises, is there a way to integrate all of this? The answer is yes. Since his interest lies in cars, there is no need to abandon this field altogether. Instead, he can seek other positions within this field that match his abilities and personality. Under the psychologist's advice, Hans switched to a career in car sales and became the leader of the dealership after 5 years. He stayed within the area of his interest and chose the right specific job direction, and his bright future is foreseeable. Now, we can also answer the question in the book's title, should we do what we are good at or what we like? In fact, the most ideal path is to choose a job within the field we are interested in that we are also good at. In other words, when choosing a field, the focus should be on interest alignment. When choosing a position, the focus should be on ability and personality alignment. However, returning to the focus of this section, interest in real life, not everyone can have a clear and singular interest like Hans. Sometimes we are uncertain about what we like, or, rather, what we might like. To address this, the author introduces a career interest test in the book. After completing the test, we calculate our scores in 6 interest directions. The higher the score in a particular career direction, the greater our interest in it. This model is also known as the Ryersek model, and the acronym Ryersek stands for the 6 directions. For example, A represents the artistic type, and a high score indicates a preference for jobs related to art and language, while C stands for the conventional type, and a high score indicates a preference for orderly and well-organized work. At this moment, you might say, it's still difficult to connect just 6 directions with real-life jobs. Indeed, that's true. So, psychologists have conducted further work, combining different dimensions to point towards various careers. Suppose your test results show high scores in the A, S, and I directions. then your career interests might be in becoming a writer, foreign language teacher, or dramatist. On the other hand, people with high scores in the E, C, and S directions are more likely to be interested in becoming business leaders, waiters, or hotel managers. As for which type each of us belongs to, only the test can reveal that. If you are interested, you can search for RIASEC Career Assessment online, as many websites offer this test. Aside from unclear interests, sometimes we don't have many choices, especially when the job market is not favorable. It can be quite challenging to achieve a balance between a good salary, fulfilling interests, and job stability. In response to this real-life dilemma, the author also shares some personal views in the book. On the one hand, when your interests are not sufficient to support your livelihood, you might consider making what you are good at your main career, while treating your interests as hobbies or side businesses. On the other hand, when it comes to interests, sometimes a reverse way of thinking is needed. Since there are people who are not good at what they are interested in, there are also those who are not interested in what they are good at. However, there is a significant gap between not being interested and disliking. Perhaps setting a bottom line is a more reasonable approach. In other words, instead of eliminating jobs that you can't stand, consider excluding those that you can't accept at all, rather than only thinking about jobs that you would be willing to work tirelessly on. In this way, our range of choices becomes broader. So far, we have explored three fundamental elements: talent or ability, personality, and interest. Our views on career development have changed significantly. It seems like it's time to open up the job recruitment software and start sending out resumes. However, at this point, some cautious friends might raise a different opinion. I know there is a concept in psychology called self-serving bias. People tend to overestimate themselves. And since I filled out the previous tests myself, if my self-assessment is not accurate, how much reference value do the test results actually have? This is a valuable consideration. Fortunately, the author has not overlooked this point. Next, we will carefully consider this issue: can I be more accurate in my self-assessment? Can I be more accurate in my self-assessment? When it comes to self-assessment, many people have heard of this paradox. Most people believe that their level of ability is above average. It has to be admitted that humans do have a tendency to overestimate ourselves, which mainly affects the test results of talent or ability and personality. Let's look at them separately. 1. Talent or ability. First, let's talk about the judgment of talent or ability. If we simply say that we should try to be as objective as possible, it seems a bit vague, so the author also provides some advice. The most critical one is that the more abstract and general we envision a certain ability, the more likely we are to overestimate ourselves. For example, when asked how we think our language skills are, we might recall that we once scored very high in Chinese or English, that our compositions were used as model essays by teachers, or that we gave a very successful speech. These are, of course, valuable achievements, but when estimating, it is necessary to consider as specifically as possible. Assuming we are considering becoming a Chinese language teacher. As mentioned earlier, Chinese language teachers need to have language skills, but these skills can be further subdivided into specific aspects, such as oral expression and written writing, classical Chinese and modern Chinese, etc. In terms of oral expression, in addition to clear logic and coherent expression, there are also issues related to pronunciation. Therefore, when assessing our talent or ability, it is best to divide a large block of ability into as many finer dimensions as possible, score each one individually, and then take the average. In this way, when faced with specific aspects, our self-assessment will be more accurate. 2. Personality. Now let's talk about the judgment of personality. It is often said that the person who knows you best is yourself, but according to surveys, compared to talent or ability and interest, personality is the aspect that we are most likely to misjudge. Sometimes, the judgment of strangers on our personality is more accurate than our self-assessment. Therefore, although it may be a bit more troublesome in practice, it is best to obtain feedback from those around us when assessing our own personality. The Big Five personality model mentioned earlier provides 5 dimensions of personality, which is indeed a good framework for thinking about judging one's own personality, but it should not be applied indiscriminately. Scientists believe that people's self-assessment in terms of extroversion and emotional stability is usually reliable. This is easy to understand. People usually have a deep personal experience of whether they are extroverted or introverted, and whether they are prone to nervousness or excitement. However, this is not the case for the dimensions of conscientiousness, agreeableness, and openness. If you are assessing whether you are cautious and reliable, cooperative with others, and imaginative, it may be more appropriate to ask others than yourself. If you can be honest with yourself and try to collect feedback from more people, even if there are still a few minor errors, there is no need to worry too much. Because although personality is important and affects career success and job satisfaction, it is not as important as interest, let alone talent or ability. When it comes to personality, we need to do our best, but we should not be too demanding on ourselves, because compared with other more important aspects, we have other areas to work on. What should I do in the future? After exploring various truths and scientific findings, the author also summarizes 10 action suggestions for us. In this sharing session, I will talk about 3 of them. If you want more help, I also recommend that you read the original book. In Chapter 7 of this book, you will find more content. 1. About goals, learn and practice more. For most people's growth, our understanding of our own talents or abilities mainly comes from school and classroom. If you are good at math, you will think you have a talent for it. If you are good at liberal arts subjects, you will choose the liberal arts track in high school. The accumulation of countless choices during student days inevitably makes us feel restricted in the end. This is a point that the author particularly cares about. He hopes to encourage us to try more. For content that is more theoretical and knowledge-based, we can find many resources online. In today's era, both enthusiastic netizens and scholars and professors share their knowledge and publish systematic courses. Please pay attention to different teachers and different subfields. Study them seriously first. Assign yourself homework to deepen your understanding, and some subtle differences may have a great impact on your judgment. As for content that is more practical and operational, the author suggests participating in more internships to gain a relatively complete experience. For readers who are still students, trying different things at this stage is saving time in the future. For those who have already entered the workplace and even have a lot of work experience, although the cost of trying to change is higher, they are more likely to persist. This is because the understanding of society and oneself increases with age. When they decide to make a change at this stage of life, they will often make a determined effort and are less likely to give up halfway. 2. About resistance, be rational and resolute. Earlier, we mentioned the importance of listening to feedback from those around us. It can be said that we rely on their support and companionship throughout our lives, but this does not mean that there will be no friction and disagreements between us. It is not a new phenomenon for parents to interfere in their children's career choices. Interference does not necessarily lead to bad outcomes. However, as the masters of our own lives, we must base our analysis and decision-making on rationality. We should not rebel just for the sake of rebellion or conform just for the sake of conformity. When a person sincerely takes responsibility for themselves, they will gain the respect and understanding of those around them, as well as help and support. At the same time, this process also requires deliberation and consideration, which is what we will discuss next. 3. About deliberation, consider a lifetime. The world is constantly changing, but even so, instead of believing that it's hard to say what will happen in the future, and choosing to take things one step at a time. A more reasonable approach is to make long-term plans. After all, many times, it is precisely because people give up on planning for the future that they have no choice but to take things one step at a time and live day by day. This does not mean that we should plan every step of the future, but rather that we should have a clear understanding of the direction of our lives. For example, we can use the funeral method to imagine what kind of eulogy we would like to hear at our own funeral, in order to clarify what is most important to us. Or, as the book The Road to Character suggests, use a lifetime as the measure for all our actions to weigh our key decisions. Deliberation is not simply a matter of vacillating or aiming for sleepless nights. Instead, it should be a quantifiable process. When you need to choose between A and B, you should list the complete pros and cons, and assign a weight to each individual item before comparing them. Moreover, this decision should not be the result of a moment of impulse. It should be tested multiple times under different circumstances and mindsets. Another method similar to listing pros and cons, but more convenient for weighing, can be called making left-right cards. This method is very simple. Before making a decision, take a piece of paper, fold it in half, and divide it into two halves. The left side is for supporting reasons, and the right side is for opposing reasons. For example, if you are considering whether to take this job, you can list the advantages of the job on the left side and the disadvantages on the right side. Then, you need to score each reason based on how important you think it is. This scoring process is actually a re-examination of these reasons. You need to keep asking yourself what you really care about. For example, if you write on the left side that the job offers fast personal growth, which you value highly, you might give it a score of 5. In comparison, being close to home is also an advantage, but not as important, so you might give it a score of 3. The same applies to the right side. If the disadvantage of the job is unclear career advancement, you might give it a score of 4, and low salary a score of 3. Once all the reasons and scores are clearly laid out on the paper, you can cancel out the pros and cons with the same score. For example, if being close to home and low salary both have a score of 3, you can simply cross them out. In the end, you may find that although the job has many pros and cons, after canceling out those with the same score, what remains are the high-scoring advantages of fast growth and alignment with personal interests. Naturally, you can then consider trying out this job. The American statesman Benjamin Franklin also often used this method. He realized early on that when people make decisions, they usually base them on the reasons that come most easily to mind at the time, but these reasons are often not what truly matters to them in the end. Therefore, by using left-right cards, even if the scores given to each reason may not be very scientific, at least after comparing each item individually, we can avoid making basic mistakes. Franklin said that after doing this, you can identify the key points. If no new reasons come to mind on either side after considering for a day or two, you can then make a decision. In addition to the pros and cons list, the author also particularly suggests that we consider the situation of regret. Will we regret the options we give up in the future? If you now choose a stable but boring job, and your friend chooses a job that can realize personal value, will you regret it when you see his proud appearance in the future? If you choose a free but financially unstable job, will you envy those who follow the routine but do not have to worry about money in the future? These questions are not easy to answer, but it can be certain that only when you truly follow your heart and weigh all the pros and cons, can your soul be free. Choosing a career is something most people need to consider, and for some, it may even be a lifelong pursuit. From my observation, many top university graduates prioritize cost-effectiveness in their career choices. Among the jobs they can find, they choose the one with the highest salary or the most recognition. In this process, the self is minimized, and people do not clarify what they truly want and are willing to strive and sacrifice for. After working for a few years, Many people suddenly realize that what they have been striving for may not be the ambition in their core self, yet they are stuck in a high-paying job, unable to move forward or backward. Then, as I saw in the interview I mentioned earlier, they begin to feel exhausted and lost, complaining about their work and life. This is also why seemingly privileged individuals can be so unhappy. Therefore, before making a career choice, it is very important to use the framework of ability, personality, and interest judgment we discussed today, along with the deliberation checklist of weighing pros and cons, to analyze the compatibility of the different choices at hand with oneself.